Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, Volume 1, Chapter 3. A very nice saintly person. There has not been, there will not be, such benefactors of the highest merit as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees have been. The offer of other benefits is only a deception. It is rather a great harm, whereas the benefit done by him and his followers is the truest and greatest eternal benefit. This benefit is not for one particular country causing mischief to another, but it benefits the whole universe. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Abhay's friend Narendranath Mulik was insistent. He wanted Abhay to see a sadhu from Mayapur. Naren and some of his friends had already met the sadhu at his nearby ashrama on Ultadanga Junction Road, and now they wanted Abhay's opinion. Everyone within their circle of friends considered Abhay the leader, so if Naren could tell the others that Abhay also had a high regard for the sadhu, then that would confirm their own estimations. Abhay was reluctant to go, but Naren pressed him. They stood talking amidst the passerby on the crowded early evening street as the traffic of horse-drawn hackneys, ox carts, and occasional auto taxis and motor buses moved noisily on the road. Naren put his hand firmly around his friend's arm, trying to drag him forward, while Abhay smiled but stubbornly pulled the other way. Naren argued that since they were only a few blocks away, they should at least pay a short visit. Abhay laughed and asked to be excused. People could see that the two young men were friends, but it was a curious sight. The handsome young man dressed in white khadi kurta and dhoti being pulled along by his friend. Naren explained that the sadhu, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, was a Vaishnava and a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of his disciples, a sannyasi, had visited the Mulik house and had invited them to meet Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. A few of the Muliks had gone to see him and had been very much impressed. But Abhay remained skeptical. "Oh no, I know all these sadhus," he said. "I am not going." Abhay had seen many sadhus in his childhood. Every day his father had entertained at least 3 or 4 in his home. Some of them were no more than beggars and some even smoked ganja. Gaur Mohan had been very liberal in allowing anyone who wore the saffron robes of a sannyasi to come. But did it mean that though a man was no more than a beggar or ganja smoker, he had to be considered saintly just because he dressed as a sannyasi or was collecting funds in the name of building a monastery or could influence people with his speech? No. By and large, they were a disappointing lot. Abhay had even seen a man in his neighborhood who was a beggar by occupation. In the morning, when others dressed in their work clothes and went to their jobs, this man would put on saffron cloth and go out to beg, and in this way earn his livelihood. But was it fitting that such a so-called sadhu be paid a respectful visit as if he were a guru? Naren argued that he felt that this particular sadhu was a very learned scholar, and that Abhay should at least meet him and judge for himself. Abhay wished that Naren would not behave this way, but finally he could no longer refuse his friend. Together they walked past the Parsnath Jain temple to Ultadanga with its sign Bhakti Vinodasana announcing it to be the quarters of the Gaudiya Math. When they inquired at the door, a young man recognized Mr. Mulik. Naren had previously given a donation and immediately escorted them up to the roof of the second floor and into the presence of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who was sitting and enjoying the early evening atmosphere with a few disciples and guests. Sitting with his back very straight, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati appeared tall. He was slender, his arms were long, and his complexion was fair and golden. He wore round bifocals with simple frames. His nose was sharp, his forehead broad, and his expression was very scholarly, yet not at all timid. The vertical markings of Vaishnava Tilaka on his forehead were familiar to Abhay, as were the simple sannyasa robes that draped over his right shoulder, leaving the other shoulder and half his chest bare. He wore tulasi neck beads, and the clay Vaishnava markings of Tilaka were visible at his throat, shoulder, and upper arms. A clean white Brahmanical thread was looped around his neck and draped across his chest. Abhay and Narain, having both been raised in Vaishnava families, immediately offered prostrated obeisances at the sight of the revered sannyasi. While the two young men were still rising and preparing to sit, before any preliminary formalities of conversation had begun, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta immediately said to them, "You are educated young men. Why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the whole world?" Abhay could hardly believe what he had just heard. They had not even exchanged views. Yet, this sadhu was telling them what they should do. Sitting face to face with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Abhay was gathering his wits and trying to gain a comprehensible impression. But this person had already told them to become preachers and go all over the world. Abhay was immediately impressed. But he wasn't going to drop his intelligent skepticism. After all, there were assumptions in what the sadhu had said. Abhay had already announced himself by his dress to be a follower of Gandhi, and he felt the impulse to raise an argument. Yet, as he continued to listen to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta speak, he also began to feel won over by the sadhu's strength of conviction. He could see that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta didn't care for anything but Lord Chaitanya, and that this was what made him great. This was why followers had gathered around him, and why Abhay himself felt drawn, inspired, and humbled and wanted to hear more. But he felt obliged to make an argument to test the truth. Drawn irresistibly into discussion, Abhay spoke up in answer to the words Srila Bhakti Siddhanta had so tersely spoken in the first seconds of their meeting. "Who will hear your Chaitanya's message?" Abhay queried. "We are a dependent country. First, India must become independent. How can we spread Indian culture if we are under British rule?" Abhay had not asked haughtily, just to be provocative. Yet his question was clearly a challenge. If he were to take the sadhu's remark to them as a serious one, and there was nothing in Srila Siddhanta Saraswati's demeanor to indicate that he had not been serious, Abhay felt compelled to question how he could propose such a thing while India was still dependent. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta replied in a quiet, deep voice that Krishna consciousness didn't have to wait for a change in Indian politics, nor was it dependent on who ruled. Krishna consciousness was so important, so exclusively important, that it could not wait. Abhay was struck by his boldness. How could he say such a thing? The whole world of India, beyond this little Ultadanga rooftop, was in turmoil and seemed to support what Abhay had said. Many famous leaders of Bengal, many saints, even Gandhi himself, men who were educated and spiritually minded, all might very well have asked the same question, challenging this sadhu's relevancy. And yet he was dismissing everything and everyone as if they were of no consequence. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta continued. Whether one power or another ruled was a temporary situation. But the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness, and the real self is the spirit soul. No man-made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of the Vedic scriptures and the line of spiritual masters. Although everyone is an eternal servant of God, when one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement for Swaraj, were simply cultivating this illusion. Real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him re-establish his eternal relationship with the Supreme. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had articulated these ideas many times before in his writings. There has not been, there will not be such benefactors of the highest merit as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees have been. The offer of other benefits is only a deception, it is rather a harm, whereas the benefit done by him and his followers is the truest and greatest eternal benefit. This benefit is not for one particular country causing mischief to another, but its benefits the whole universe. The kindness that Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has shown to jivas absolves them eternally from all wants, from all inconveniences, and from all the distresses. That kindness does not produce any evil, and the jivas who have it will not be the victims of the evils of this world. As Abhay listened attentively to the arguments of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he recalled a Bengali poet who had written that even less advanced civilizations like China and Japan were independent, and yet India labored under political oppression. Abhay knew well the philosophy of nationalism, which stressed that Indian independence had to come first. An oppressed people was a reality. The British slaughter of innocent citizens was a reality, and independence would benefit people. Spiritual life was a luxury that could be afforded only after independence. In the present times, the cause of national liberation from the British was the only relevant spiritual movement. The people's cause was in itself God. Yet, because Abhay had been raised a Vaishnava, he appreciated what Srila Bhakti Siddhanta was saying. Abhay had already concluded that this was certainly not just another questionable sadhu, and he perceived the truth in what Srila Bhakti Siddhanta said. This sadhu wasn't concocting his own philosophy, and he wasn't simply proud or belligerent, even though he spoke in a way that kicked out practically every other philosophy. He was speaking the eternal teachings of the Vedic literature and the sages, and Abhay loved to hear it. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, speaking sometimes in English and sometimes in Bengali, and sometimes quoting the Sanskrit verses of the Bhagavad Gita, spoke of Sri Krishna as the highest Vedic authority. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna had declared that a person should give up whatever duty he considers religious and surrender unto him, the personality of Godhead. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. And the Srimad Bhagavatam confirmed the same thing. Dharmaha projhita kaitavo atra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. All other forms of religion are impure and should be thrown out, and only Bhagavata Dharma, performing one's duties to please the Supreme Lord, should remain. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's presentation was so cogent that anyone who accepted the Shastras would have to accept his conclusion. The people were now faithless, said Bhakti Siddhanta, and therefore they no longer believed that devotional service could remove all anomalies, even on the political scene. He went on to criticize anyone who was ignorant of the soul and yet claimed to be a leader. He even cited names of contemporary leaders and pointed out their failures, and he emphasized the urgent need to render the highest good to humanity by educating people about the eternal soul and the soul's relation to Krishna and devotional service. Abhay had never forgotten the worship of Lord Krishna or his teachings in Bhagavad Gita, and his family had always worshipped Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose mission Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was espousing. As these Gaudiya Math people worshipped Krishna, he also had worshipped Krishna throughout his life and had never forgotten Krishna. But now he was astounded to hear the Vaishnava philosophy presented so masterfully. Despite his involvement in college, marriage, the national movement, and other affairs, he had never forgotten Krishna, but Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was now stirring up within him his original Krishna consciousness, and by the words of this spiritual master, not only was he remembering Krishna, but he felt his Krishna consciousness being enhanced 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. What had been unspoken in Abhay's boyhood, what had been vague in Jagannath Puri, what he had been distracted from at college, what he had been protected in by his father, now surged forth within Abhay in response responsive feelings and he wanted to keep it. He felt himself defeated, but he liked it. He suddenly realized that he had never before been defeated. But this defeat was not a loss. It was an immense gain. Srila Prabhupada. I was from a Vaishnava family, so I could appreciate what he was preaching. Of course, he was speaking to everyone, but he found something in me, and I was convinced about his argument and mode of presentation. I was so much struck with wonder. I could understand here is the proper person who can give a real religious idea. It was late. Abhay and Naren had been talking with him for more than 2 hours. One of the brahmacharis gave them each a bit of prasadam in their open palms and they rose gratefully and took their leave. They walked down the stairs and onto the street. The night was dark. Here and there a light was burning and there were some open shops. Abhay pondered in great satisfaction what he had just heard. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's explanation of the independence movement as a temporary, incomplete cause had made a deep impression on him. He felt himself less a nationalist and more a follower of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He also thought that it would have been better if he were not married. This great personality was asking him to preach. He could have immediately joined, but he was married and to leave his family would be an injustice. Walking away from the ashrama, Naren turned to his friend. So, Abhay, what was your impression? What do you think of him? He is wonderful, replied Abhay. The message of Lord Chaitanya is in the hands of a very expert person. Srila Prabhupada. I accepted him as my spiritual master immediately. Not officially, but in my heart. I was thinking that I had met a very nice saintly person. After his first meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Abhay began to associate more with the Gaudiya Math devotees. They gave him books and told him the history of their spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was one of 10 children born to Bhakti Vinoda Thakura, a great Vaishnava teacher in the disciplic line from Lord Chaitanya himself. Before the time of Bhakti Vinoda, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya had been obscured by teachers and sects, falsely claiming to be followers of Lord Chaitanya, but deviating in various drastic ways from his pure teachings. The good reputation of Vaishnavism had been compromised. Bhakti Vinoda Thakura, however, through his prolific writings and through his social position as a high government officer, re-established the respectability of Vaishnavism. He preached that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya were the highest form of theism and were intended not for a particular sect or religion or nation, but for all the people of the world. He prophesied that Lord Chaitanya's teachings would go worldwide and he yearned for it. The religion preached by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is universal and not exclusive. The principle of Kirtan as the future church of the world invites all classes of men without distinction of caste or clan to the highest cultivation of spirit. This church, it appears, will extend all over the world and take the place of all sectarian churches which exclude outsiders from the precincts of the mosque, church or temple. Lord Chaitanya did not advent himself to liberate only a few men of India. Rather, his main objective was to emancipate all living entities of all countries throughout the entire universe and preach the eternal religion. Lord Chaitanya says in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in every town, country and village my name will be sung. There is no doubt that this unquestionable order will come to pass. Although there is still no pure society of Vaishnavas to be had, yet Lord Chaitanya's prophetic words will in a few days come true, I am sure. Why not? Nothing is absolutely pure in the beginning. From imperfection, purity will come about. Oh, for that day when the fortunate English, French, Russian, German and American people will take up banners, mrudangas and kartals and raise kirtan through their streets and towns. When will that day come? As a prominent magistrate, Bhakti Vinoda Thakura was a responsible government officer. He served also as superintendent of the temple of Lord Jagannatha and was the father of 10 children. Yet, in spite of these responsibilities, he served the cause of Krishna with prodigious energy. After coming home from his office in the evening, taking his meals and going to bed, he would sleep from 8 until midnight and then get up and write until morning. He wrote more than 100 books during his life, many of them in English. One of his important contributions, with the cooperation of Jagannath Dasa Babaji and Gaurakishora Dasa Babaji, was to locate the exact birthplace of Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur, about 60 miles north of Calcutta. While working to reform Gaudiya Vaishnavism in India, he prayed to Lord Chaitanya, "Your teachings have been much depreciated. It is not in my power to restore them." And he prayed for a son to help him in his preaching. When, on February 6, 1874, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was born to Bhakti Vinoda Thakura in Jagannath Puri, the Vaishnavas considered him the answers to his father's prayers. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck and draped across his chest like the sacred thread worn by Brahmanas. His parents gave him the name Bimala Prasada. When Bimala Prasada was 6 months old, the carts of Jagannatha festival stopped at the gate of Bhakti Vinoda's residence and for 3 days could not be moved. Bhakti Vinoda Thakura's wife brought the infant onto the cart and approached the deity of Lord Jagannatha. Spontaneously, the infant extended his arms and touched the feet of Lord Jagannatha and was immediately blessed with a garland that fell from the body of the Lord. When Bhakti Vinoda Thakura learned that the Lord's garland had fallen onto his son, he realized that this was the son for whom he had prayed. One day, when Bimala Prasada was still a child of no more than 4 years, his father mildly rebuked him for eating a mango not yet duly offered to Lord Krishna. Bimala Prasada, although only a child, considered himself an offender to the Lord and vowed never to eat mangoes again. This was a vow that he would follow throughout his life. By the time Bimala Prasada was 7 years old, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita and could even explain its verses. His father then began training him in proofreading and printing in conjunction with the publishing of the Vaishnava magazine Sajjana Toshani. With his father, he visited many holy places and heard discourses from the learned Panditas. As a student, Bimala Prasada preferred to read the books written by his father instead of the school texts. By the time he was 25, he had become well versed in Sanskrit, mathematics, and astronomy, and he had established himself as the author and publisher of many magazine articles and one book, Surya Siddhanta, for which he received the epithet Siddhanta Saraswati in recognition of his erudition. When he was 26, his father guided him to take initiation from a renounced Vaishnava saint, Gaurakishora Dasa Babaji, who advised him to preach the absolute truth and keep aside all other works. Receiving the blessings of Gaurakishora Dasa Babaji, Bimala Prasada, now Siddhanta Saraswati, resolved to dedicate his body, mind and words to the service of Lord Krishna. In 1905, Siddhanta Saraswati took a vow to chant the Hare Krishna mantra 1,000,000,000 times. Residing in Mayapur in a grass hut near the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, he chanted the Hare Krishna mantra day and night. He cooked rice once a day in an earthen pot and ate nothing more. He slept on the ground, and when the rainwater leaked through the grass ceiling, he sat beneath an umbrella chanting. In 1911, while his aging father was lying ill, Siddhanta Saraswati took up a challenge against pseudo-Vaishnavas who claimed that birth in their caste was the prerequisite for preaching Krishna consciousness. The caste-conscious Brahmana community had become incensed by Bhakti Vinoda Thakura's presentation of many scriptural proofs that anyone, regardless of birth, could become a Brahmana Vaishnava. These Smarta Brahmanas, out to prove the inferiority of the Vaishnavas, arranged a discussion. On behalf of his indisposed father, young Siddhanta Saraswati wrote an essay, The Conclusive Difference Between the Brahmana and the Vaishnava, and submitted it before his father. Despite his poor health, Bhakti Vinoda Thakura was elated to hear the arguments that would soundly defeat the challenge of the Smarthas. Siddhanta Saraswati then travelled to Midnapur, where Panditas from all over the country had gathered for a 3-day discussion. Some of the Smarta Panditas who spoke first claimed that anyone born in a Shudra family, even though initiated by a spiritual master, could never become purified and perform the Brahminical duties of worshipping the deity or initiating disciples. Finally, Siddhanta Saraswati delivered his speech. He began quoting Vedic references, glorifying the Brahmanas, and at this time the Smarta scholars became very much pleased. But when he began discussing the actual qualifications for becoming a Brahmana, the qualities of the Vaishnavas, the relationship between the two, and who, according to the Vedic literature, is qualified to become a spiritual master and initiate disciples, then the joy of the Vaishnava haters disappeared. Siddhanta Saraswati conclusively proved from the scriptures that if one is born a Shudra but exhibits the qualities of a Brahmana, then he should be honored as a Brahmana despite his birth. And if one is born in a Brahmana family but acts like a Shudra, then he is not a Brahmana. After his speech, Siddhanta Saraswati was congratulated by the president of the conference, and thousands thronged around him. It was a victory for Vaishnavism. With the passing away of his father in 1914 and his spiritual master in 1915, Siddhanta Saraswati continued the mission of Lord Chaitanya. He assumed editorship of Sajjana Toshani and established the Bhagavat Press in Krishnanagar. Then in 1918 in Mayapur, he sat down before a picture of Gaurakishora Dasa Babaji and initiated himself into the sannyasa order. At this time, he assumed the sannyasa title Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaja. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was dedicated to using the printing press as the best medium for large-scale distribution of Krishna consciousness. He thought of the printing press as a Brihat Mridanga, a big Mridanga. Although the Mridanga drum had traditionally been used to accompany Kirtana, even during the time of Lord Chaitanya, and although Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati himself led Kirtana parties and sent groups of devotees chanting in the streets and playing on the Mridangas, such Kirtanas could be heard only for a block or two. But with the Brihat Mridanga, the big Mridanga, drum of the printing press, the message of Lord Chaitanya could be spread all over the world. Most of the literature Abhay began reading had been printed on the Bhagavat Press, which Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had established in 1915. The Bhagavat Press had printed the Chaitanya Charitamrita with commentary by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, the Bhagavad Gita with commentary by Vishwanatha Chakravarti, and one after another the works of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. This literature was the spiritual heritage coming from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who had appeared almost 500 years before. Abhay had been a devotee of Lord Chaitanya since childhood, and he was familiar with the life of Lord Chaitanya through the well-known scriptures Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavata. He had learnt of Lord Chaitanya not only as the most ecstatic form of a pure devotee who had spread the chanting of the holy names to all parts of India, but also as the direct appearance of Sri Krishna himself in the form of Radha and Krishna combined. But now, for the first time, Abhay was in touch with the great wealth of literature compiled by the Lord's immediate associates and followers, passed down in disciplic succession and expended on by great authorities. Lord Chaitanya's immediate followers, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami, Srila Jiva Goswami and others had compiled many volumes based on the Vedic scriptures and proving conclusively that Lord Chaitanya's teachings were the essence of the Vedic wisdom. There were many books not yet published, but Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was intent on establishing many presses just to release the sound of the Brihat Mridanga for the benefit of all people. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was teaching the conclusion of Lord Chaitanya's teachings that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that the chanting of his holy name should be stressed above all other religious practices. In former ages, other methods of attaining to God had been available, but in the present age of Kali, only the chanting of Hare Krishna would be effective. On the authority of scriptures such as Brihanaradiya Purana and the Upanishads, Bhaktivinoda Thakura had specifically cited the Mahamantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Krishna himself had confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that the only method of attaining him was devotional service. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Abhay knew these verses. He knew the chanting and he knew the conclusions of the Gita. But now, as he eagerly read the writings of the great Acharyas, he had fresh realizations of the scope of Lord Chaitanya's mission. Now he was discovering the depth of his own Vaishnava heritage and its efficacy for bringing about the highest welfare for people in an age destined to be full of troubles.